Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Greg Elliott, and I'm joined by a full team today. Oscar, how you doing, mate? You right?
Yeah, all good, thanks.
Zach, you doing good?
Yeah, loving life, mate.
Good. We are back, and this would normally be our crossover episode. Unfortunately, we have not expanded into the wonderful world of the Championship yet, and we do not have any colleagues from Burnley. And so I thought that we would just wing it a bit and just have a bit of a chat about football in general, and how we're doing. We're all feeling a bit more upbeat since our win at the weekend, so I thought we would just look at the transfer window as a whole, some of the left field moves that we've seen, some out of the blue stuff, and just where football's at the moment. But yeah, I guess let's get into it. Referees suck, right?
No, I want to roll back to transfers. So from the outside looking in, if you look at the window and sort of Man City's collapse this season, which seems to have resulted in them spending somehow like I think of how much we've spent in recent times, and I don't really understand how you can get away with just spending like 50 million quid on a midfielder on like deadline day, and just kind of like hoping that that's going to fill the gap of Rodri. And I find it wild that so many sort of these bigger clubs, like whenever they get an injury, like I understand it with a long-term injury, so don't get me wrong, but sort of just go like, oh, one of our best players is injured. Let's buy like 6 players just in case. And then you just have these overly inflated, bloated squads like Chelsea, where like they thought if we spend a £1 trillion, surely we have to get it right. And arguably they've kind of got it right. But then like also you've seen some really weird left field transfers, like the whole Marcus Rashford for Aston Villa, which I don't know if you guys saw the like somebody tweeted like 4 years ago, like Rashi in 4 years, and it was Rashford at Aston Villa. However, I do think that the understanding at that point was that Villa would not be quite in the lofty heights of where they are currently.
I mean,
but yeah,
that's how crazy this season's been, right? Because genuinely, that feels like a step up. Right?
I was going to say the exact same thing.
You fans are like sort of, he's gone away to Villa, and I'm like, it's like seeing Danny Ings go to Villa. You're kind of like, oh, okay, that's a bit of a step down. Not anymore. Villa are a Champions League team for a long period of the Champions League. Villa were like top/almost top. That's insane. It's kind of one of the reasons I like the new format, if I'm totally honest. But
have Villa had the best January transfer window? Like it feels like it, right? Like they lost Duran, who's been scoring for them, but they brought in what? Rashford, Asensio, Marlon from Dortmund.
They lost for 72 million. Like that's not. He was a good sub to come on and score goals, but that's not really that bad, is it? That would be like us selling somebody for 72 million. But okay, like one of our bench warmers coming on to sell 72 million. Oh, you're so harsh on Smallbone, man.
It's been a bit of a crazy one. Any standouts for you, Oscar, from the window as a whole?
I couldn't believe that Burnley have signed Marcus Edwards. I think that one's absolute madness. He's gone from Sporting. I believe he was at Sporting, wasn't he? He's gone from Sporting to Burnley.
That's got to be
serious
sometimes
culture
those left field
well.
ones, right? Like such left field transfers that have happened so far this year. But you're right, that is also a bit of a weird one, and just there have been more than a few this year that have kind of made me go, oh yeah. And,
Ben Chilwell to Crystal Palace.
Well, again, that's just indicative of the fact that you have a Chelsea squad that has like 10,000 people in it. Like we're quite lucky that they seem to have so many defensive midfielders that they haven't needed Ugochukwu back because they almost did. Luckily, Lavia's hamstrings didn't snap this year, so yeah, it's a weird one, right? And yet somehow some of the best sort of bits of business have been academy players coming up, or alternatively, if you're Nottingham Forest, when you bought Chris Wood like 3 transfer windows ago and nobody cared, it suddenly becomes like
crazy.
Almost top scorer of the Premier League. Mad, isn't it?
I don't know if any of you heard on TalkSport, they were talking to, I think it was Darragh Anthony, the Peterborough owner, who's an interesting character. I haven't really heard him before. He made a good point of how many, can you think of how many, like specifically to Southampton, how many January transfers have we ever done that have been successful that you can think? Certainly in recent history, I can't think of many.
Charlie Austin did all right. He scored at Man U. And that at Old Trafford got us our first win there.
Yeah, but also
he was
that is also about 8 years ago. So
yeah, I don't know. Tall Paul was a January signing, right?
Yeah, but he was also
coming good now.
But again, like for that season, it didn't really help, did it? You know, Solomana, Tall Paul, like yes, they've come good now, but also both were kind of missing in a championship when it would have, you know, it's only because we're back in the Premier League that they've wanted to kind of stay or start putting the effort in. Maybe that's a bit harsh on Solomana. I know he got injured and was out for a lot of that time, but I can't think of many January transfers we had. I'm trying to remember if Ings was a January transfer the first time when he came back, but I might just be going mad.
I'm not too sure. He was on loan, wasn't he?
Yeah, because he came in on loan. I don't know if it was for the full season or the 6 months, and then we bought him in the summer because that was also we did that. We used to do that quite a lot before it became like a popular thing. I swear, because we had Bertrand from Chelsea, another one of the Chelsea players that you're just like, you forget have all played for Chelsea because they seem to have bought everybody at some point and then not played them. But yeah, I can't remember, but that window was bad, right? Like Orsic, remember his whole 7 minutes of game time he got for us?
That's crazy. I remember when he played those minutes, in fact, and he got subbed on, I think, at the same time as Alcaraz in his debut, and I looked at him and went, "Oh, Orsic looks like the better player of the two here," and that could not have been a worse take.
Oh, mate.
We didn't even talk about it in our transfer special, actually, but because we were so miserable and focused on staying up late to focus on Saints that Alcaraz went to Everton as well.
Oh, dude, it's like an arrow to the heart, isn't it? Like perfect. So we let go this good attacking player that's now being purchased by. Do we call them relegation rivals? I kind of say we do at this point, right? Like they've not. I know they've got boys back now, and it's not the same short dodgeball, so you're not really expecting them to be in a relegation battle. But at the same time, that bottom of the table, other than us, which are pretty cemented to the bottom, is a bit more dynamic than I think most of the clubs in the bottom sort of 10 would want to be, right?
Yeah.
Again, weird season. Back to your earlier point, Greg, of how strange it's been so far, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess we can move on to have a bit of a chat about that and how close it is at the bottom, and if really there is anyone else in danger other than the three that came up. But first, a message from our partners at Zencastr. So here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. So yeah, I mean, I guess having a look at the table, you're right. It's not as clear cut as it sounds, is it? The three that came up go down. Wolves are right amongst it, and yeah, Everton are within reach.
And West Ham and Spurs, weirdly, and even technically United. Like it's kind of mad, but also because we're having such a bad season, there's less emphasis on the fact that like when we fired Hasenhüttl, it was because we had like 12, 13 points after like something amount of games, got rid of him in like the November, December period. And then, like, you look at the two teams above us who have also sacked their managers and replaced them and have barely had a new manager bounce. And it's kind of like the points tally is really, I think because we're so bad, it kind of takes the eyes off of how bad the other teams have been.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement to make? Like, I don't want to bug off the entirety of the Premier League fan base, but like, I think that we are a good get out of jail free card for a lot of clubs that haven't been playing half as well. But like the fact that you see Manchester United and Spurs at 13th, at 14th is just Like, what a world we live in nowadays, that
Yeah.
the lofty heights of Manchester United under Fergie is now but a distant memory. And there are going to be kids now that are growing up that have only ever seen Manchester United be a bad club,
Yeah.
apart from that one time they won like a cup accidentally, or had Jose Mourinho get them second, and they thought that was apparently like not okay.
Yeah.
Weird. I feel this is one of the things, right? Like, we can always at least be positive with the sense of, like, our expectations are so low, they get surpassed constantly. Even coming back up technically is like surpassing the expectations we had. Maybe it would have been nicer if we'd stayed.
What's the biggest surprise for you this? Like, who's the furthest away from where your predictions would have lined up in the league this season, Oscar?
Probably Bournemouth, to be honest. I think fair play to Bournemouth, and they're doing what we did a few years ago, what Brighton did a few years after that, and probably are still doing now, and what they. But I wouldn't have expected, looking at their players. I don't think I was the only one. When I think we were linked with Semenyo as well, weren't we? And another one that I sort of turned my nose up at a little bit, and obviously completely wrong about that one.
I think I put Bournemouth as going down.
Yeah, I thought. I think it's a matter of time until they are dragged back into that at some point. I mean, it's just clubs our size, and I'm saying they're in a similar size. Obviously, where they are at the moment, it's a lot better. But in fact, the argument's probably they're a little bit smaller. Not to incite the entire of the Bournemouth fan base, but the reality of it is that they will just get pulled apart eventually by a big club. I've already heard people linking Iraola with Tottenham, and I don't know why he'd go there for the life of me. But I think it's a shame, but it's a matter of time, I think, before they sort of drop off a little bit. But I think they're the big ones for me, and Forest as well. I think everyone would say the same, and I think there's quite a few high profile people that have said they thought Forest might be candidates to have gone down this year. And again, just goes to show sometimes.
I've actually just brought up my predictions to check, and actually I had Bournemouth surviving relegation by one place, finishing above Forest. So maybe I just don't know anything about football at this point.
No, I think it just can rapidly change, and you can have a really, really good season. Like Leicester proved that a couple of years ago, right? Like Leicester won the league after almost getting relegated, and then the problem is that almost immediately they were stripped. And Kante went to Chelsea. You've now got Maguire at the lofty heights of Man United. Admittedly, it took a time to pick that squad apart, but that's what happened. And I think Oscar's right on the money that, like, the problem is as successful as Bournemouth are going to be now is keeping hold of the players, because Brighton have done exactly the same thing, but Brighton are starting to pay dividends this year. They've still had a good season by the stretch of what they probably expected, but you're starting to see their sort of big players get picked apart, going off every year, and it's becoming unsustainable as the losses are starting to kind of stack up, and they're not small losses either, and they're managing to get away some suitors. Like, I know that I can't remember which Saudi club came in for Matoma with some quite big offers, and they're kind of managing to hold on to what I would consider to be their good peripheral players. But you look at the likes of Trossard, and you look at the likes of Caicedo, and like, it's not sustainable to have your best players taken from you over time, right? Like, one of the reasons we were able to do it is we lost a bunch of players and then recruited well, and then the instant that recruitment dried up and we didn't recruit well, and we didn't replace, we didn't spend the Van Dijk money wisely, we got into trouble, and then bang, we're in the situation we're in now, which you could arguably point to all of our best players going. Flip side of that, how do you stop them? If you're playing for Bournemouth and all of a sudden Arsenal come in, you've grown up wanting to play for a big club, what do you do?
Yeah, and Southampton actually probably they tried to do that with Van Dijk and just
have that work out.
Yeah, exactly.
Pictures of him on a private plane looking sad. I remember it. That image is etched into my memory forever. And then when the transfer was confirmed, I was so mad. I was in Asda. I still remember. I was like, of course he wants to leave. Why would he want to stay? Blah, 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 blah. My wife just standing next to me like, I don't care, but you pop off. You seem like you need it.
I just think gone are the days where you're going to have, I don't know, this is probably treading over old ground, but gone are the days of like a Letizia where he stays forever, and Ward-Prowse would have been that one for us. And sadly,
Leicester still have Vardy, and then even that has been batting away massive bids. But that's the thing, is that, like, how much I cannot wait to see in the summer like what some clubs are going to bid for Chris Wood and what level of insane price it's going to be. And then here they might go. And then the problem is like there's a few cases of it working out, but a lot of the times it doesn't really seem to, at least in the sense of the footballing side, right? Like I feel like if your job is to get paid more money and you would like to be paid more money and you go to a big club that can pay ridiculous wages, even if you don't do great, right? You're still being paid a metric ton of money. This is why, like, when people bat an eyelid at sort of the Neymars and what could have been of his career and Mbappe finally going to Real Madrid and all those kind of transfers, it's just like, well, yeah, but I don't think, like you said, I just don't think you have that in football anymore. And I think that the differences in wages between these clubs and what they're able to offer, and not only that, like it's stuff outside wages, right? It's like, you know, you hear like Matt Lettiz talk about like, oh yeah, I'll get like a McDonald's breakfast on the way to training, then like swig a beer after and stuff. And then you've got some players that are like, unless you move my entire family and my extended like staff of chefs and like nutritionists, I will not come to your club. And they're like, okay, but how about 4 houses? Because that's a lot of the stuff that people don't talk about with these transfer deals. Is like it's the stuff in between, right? It's the what extra can you have on top, and also just greed.
I'd be fascinated to see John Duran's contract, to be fair. I think he's set for, probably could retire after that. Am I right in thinking that I heard he said, it's been my childhood dream to play for Al Nassr? Because
he
I'm
did
not entirely
say that,
convinced. Yeah. He did say that.
Followed him since I was a boy. I mean, it has to have been said tongue-in-cheek, right? There's no way you say that with a straight face, like...
Maybe, to be fair, maybe the Saudi League is massive in Colombia. I'm not too sure.
This is the thing, right? Like there are always other leagues that we do not pay much attention to, which have, you know, their ultra fans and stuff. We don't really have it in the UK anymore because of the extensive campaign to combat football hooliganism, right? But then you go to anywhere else, and like I remember seeing the Ultras at Anderlecht in Belgium, and that itself scared me. And I was like, it's not really like, it's not the biggest league in the world, but like they take their football seriously. So who knows? Maybe it's just that we do not. I guess the way that football is consumed is different for our league now, right? Regardless. Maybe League One is slightly more like it, or where that was that story the other day that guy got a red card for taking a pee at the side of the pitch. Don't know how much truth there actually is to that. Either way, it was a very funny tweet.
0 minutes in as well. that was the bit that got me. Okay, right. Well, that's just about wraps up our second half. So, time for a message from our partners at the Global Sports Podcast Network.
The Global Sport Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up, broadcasted in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts.
Okay, so in our final section, I thought I would bring it back round to the FA Cup. So we've got a cup fixture this weekend against Burnley, who, you know, played Tuesday night and I believe are playing in the week again next week. So probably going to heavily rotate their squad. So my actual question is, do people actually care about the FA Cup anymore? Are we seeing the magic really die out because of how we've had to saturate it to accommodate all of the other growth in fixtures? Throw it out to the room.
I think, there's definitely a slight edge taken off it, or, you know, I'm not massively, it's the cup this weekend, it is what it is. I've never been massively into the traditionalism of the FA Cup, to be fair, but I know there are others that are, and like this is what people grew up with, and, you know, I probably should be given that. You know, Southampton, I think part of the reason I started supporting Southampton was the 2003 FA Cup final. That was part of what got me into football, to be fair. So, but I don't know. I think they just need to look at it and think of something different. And the thing this year with the replays has been a bit. Was that the FA Cup, or was that the League Cup?
No, it's the FA Cup. I think you're right. Bang on the money. That's the biggest problem with stuff like that. Is that if you're going to talk about heritage and tradition and all that kind of stuff, and part of it is to kind of build the profile of these smaller non-league teams, and because it is exciting that you can get these kind of absolute giant killings. The problem is when you take away a massive source of income for them, which is replays, because you need to cram in another random fixture that's suitable for TV in the Middle East for it's we need to make this at 9 p.m. because it's really good viewing for Southeast Asia. Because of that, we're not going to do a replay for Tamworth at Tottenham Stadium, so they don't get their absolute bag that they'd have made from ticket sales, which is mad. Like, unless you're going to do something where, okay, if they get brought to extra time, the other team gets to pay out to these smaller clubs, because I just think that if you're a traditionalist about it and you didn't want it to change, and you really enjoy the cup and the magic of the cup, that's fine. From my perspective, if they're just going to completely butcher it anyway, it kind of ruins it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'd ask the question maybe, and not necessarily the FA Cup, because I know people are very particular about that, but could we use the Carabao Cup as an example, as maybe an experimental way, change the game slightly? If you want to experiment with things like offside, automated offsides, or VAR, or, as an example, or different rules. I don't know what you could do. I'm sure there's lots of different things. Maybe you could do that in the League Cup. I don't know, headers and volleys. Yeah. I'm not saying that as an example, but there could be something.
One ice hockey style fight per game.
Could you do it 7-a-side? Could they think of a creative way of keeping interest in one of the cups? I think, do you know what? I might watch that tonight, or I'd really be keen to go and watch this. It's something a bit different, because I don't know. Maybe that's.
If you're going to keep the FA Cup, just get rid of the Carabao Cup.
Yeah.
But I agree. Like, I think it's much better than sort of when we randomly go, we're going to introduce this into the middle of the biggest league in the world, despite the fact we don't know if we've got it right yet. Right? Like, I understand that when they first introduced VAR, they'd had it in international competitions, but those international competitions also had a multitude of international refs and a multitude of shared knowledge, right? Whereas we've already established there was a BBC article out today about they've 13 mistakes in the Premier League season so far. 4 of the ones that they've cited. Of the 4 that they've cited, 1 is Forest's disallowed goal against us, because apparently, obviously, Chris Wood came from an offside position and impeded the Southampton defenders to challenge the ball. Wood did not touch the ball. Result: an independent panel followed the goal, said it should have been given. And it's just kind of mad that they're admitting, and yeah, you can test that kind of stuff out and go, do you know what? We need to do some work on it in a cup competition that you could still make exciting, but just make it test stuff out in a more controlled environment than the league.
Yeah.
That if you knocked out of the cup, it's not the end of the world. If you're knocked out of the Premier League, there's the parachute payments, there's money lost, there's the lack of all that kind of stuff.
This year, though, right, with these Carabao Cup semi-finals this week, and in the first leg, they're doing the whole referee has to announce their decision on a microphone to the crowd gimmick.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that we like to see. My problem with that,
they'll still just talked about this before. Get the wrong decision, so
that's part of the issue. Bringing it right back to you wanting to talk about the problem with referees and stuff. I think it's just you shouldn't have referees coming out and admitting, not even full way through the season, that they have made 13 mistakes, and they're like, we understand the cost of this. I'm like, yeah, the cost is literal points on the board.
And I think that they've lowballed that, because I think that many just relating to us.
They have fired, managers have lost their job off the back of this. I'm not saying it would have ever changed Russell Martin's trajectory, but there are a couple of times we might have won, right? I'm kind of glad with the direction we're going now anyway. It was a bit gross to see everyone come in, and you've had a lot of our transfers that have gone out because they haven't got game time, because they almost seemed pointless for half of the people we brought in the summer, because we barely played them, and when we did play them, we played them sort of out of position at our side, and then they all decided to leave because they weren't playing football. Do not understand what the Maxwell Cornet loan was about. Just don't get it.
I said it on the Anthony Taylor rant, and I stand by it. We just need to do an exchange market with referees. Send all of our referees to France and bring the French referees over here. And it can't be worse.
Is Is it all to do with sort of like helping grassroots refereeing that we don't allow foreign refs in the Premier League? Is it the whole like the pathway to be able to become? Because like some of the stuff like you're seeing, I don't want to touch too much on it, but like some of the stuff that came out of the Coots sort of statement of his announcement, and like him talking about the sort of pressures that he's had having to like referee really high intense game followed by another high intense game followed by another high intense game. So then because of that he's turning to those sort of like why is it why is it strictly we have to keep like English referees? Because also
I
I
don't
still
know.
don't like the
I've just
whole
searched it, and the top sentence that it came up with is that the Premier League believes it already has a strong pool of domestic referees capable of handling the top level of the game. And I don't think I've ever disagreed with a response more in my life.
If the Premier League's the top league in the world with a multinational league with the best players from around the world, the best managers, what percentage of players are English in the Premier League? What percentage of managers or British? And then look at what percentage of referees. Like, I imagine it's 99% and Jared Gillett, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds right. Yeah,
that's it, agreed. And like, I feel like it's such a weird place to try and take like a last stand because you're right. Like, if that's what they really cared about, if they really cared about domestic bias and all that kind of stuff, I know that we've got league registration rules. Like, good lord, it's one of the reasons we lost Ricky Lambert right to Liverpool is so they could fill a registration slot with an English player. But like, it is kind of crazy to me that that's the hill they stand on. Like, they don't do what China did and go like, you can have like 3 foreign players and that's it. If that's what they cared about. So clearly it's not really what they care about. Potentially there's got to be something else going on there. And I don't want to say there's huge conspiracy theories. Like I'm not a conspiracy theory nut job when it comes to any of that kind of stuff. But when it comes to sort of the decision making, there are so many rules that are weirdly archaic for no reason. Again, 3 p.m. blackout rule. Because like why? It's not meaning like I'm just putting it bluntly, me not being able to watch football on TV at 3 p.m. doesn't make me want to go and watch Eastleigh play instead. Never has. People will find a way. I'm not people, or maybe I am, who knows, but people will always find a way.
Yeah. No, it's crazy, but you're right. It like the amount of money in the game. You say it's so that it doesn't affect grassroots refereeing because they've got that path upwards, but as a grassroots referee, what could be more appealing than working your way up to an all expenses paid season in Australia or France or Italy? Like,
and also
that sounds ideal.
If they haven't got it so that they think they've got the best group and this, that, and the other, then there's no who's pushing up behind them to take their spots and who's putting that pressure on. Like you think of it as players. If you're comfortable, they say so many times the second you sign a new contract, you get comfortable, you get complacent. These referees know that there's nothing they can do wrong. And on top of that, let's be honest, the standard of grassroots refereeing in this country isn't particularly good either. So it's not exactly helping that.
No, it's it's a nightmare. It's awful. I mean, you only have to look at the Euros, and the only games with particularly controversial and bad refereeing decisions were the games that had English referees. I really think that speaks volumes.
Oh, it's very upsetting, isn't it?
But anyway, that is just about all we've got time for. I knew we'd get to referees eventually. It's come full circle. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with a preview of our cup fixture to Burnley. I'm not going to throw too many spoilers into the mix, but I suspect there might be some talks about 0-0. Until then, Zach, Oscar, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you everyone for listening. Catch us on the socials. We're on the Global Sports Podcast Network YouTube channel now, so give us a follow and a subscribe on there, and we will see you tomorrow.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.